This book will not teach you how to draw superheroes. It will, however, teach you how to think like Stan Lee himself and how to create a wide variety of characters. So today, we're going to look through Stan Lee's How to Draw Superheroes, and by the end of this video, you'll know all the exercises that you need to complete this book and start creating your very own superheroes. So what is this book? Now, you might flip through and see that there are some step-by-step tutorials. However, this book really focuses on superhero design. So don't expect a deep dive masterclass on how to draw, but you do want to expect some solid comic art design and thought fundamentals. Now, as with all how to draw and art books, I do recommend reading through the book in full first, then go back and try out the exercises. Now, today, I'm going to walk you briefly through the chapters and tips on what exactly to practice. So let's get after it. In chapter one, Stan Lee provides us with the history of the hero. Now, if you're not a history nerd, it's not necessary, but it's always good to educate yourself and learn about where heroes all started from. So there's a nice segment about real life heroes, which is always a great reminder that you don't need superpowers to be a hero. So shout out to all the first responders out there and thank you for your service. Chapter 2 dives right into heroes. Now, if you haven't, you should definitely read How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way to learn the fundamentals of drawing before beginning this book. Now, this book recommended right here is a book that I'll be reviewing next, but you do want to review this book first for those fundamentals. Now, if you have completed How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, utilize this chapter to refresh your memory and warm up with a full sheet of basic shapes, height proportions, and facial features. Now, in the caption here, Stan Lee mentions trying to identify as many shapes as you possibly can in the image. It's a fun exercise, and I highly recommend either taking a piece of tracing paper and tracing over it with shapes, or maybe print it out and draw over it. You'll want to read page 30 as it's very important for giving your character that secret sauce, that super serum. It's going to be their specifics on their features, their details, and their overall purpose. This is where we start learning how to think like a designer when we are creating our superheroes. Page 31 has a great gesture drawing practice example, and you'll want to practice these a few times to get the idea and flow of your superheroes. Page 32 will break down on why the costume is important and what it should reflect based on your character's powers and purpose. Now, page 35 is a great example of how this book really works and sets you up for what to ask yourself when you're creating your character and their powers. Throughout these chapters, Stan Lee breaks down two different archetypes. If you're asking yourself, what the heck are those? Basically, you have character A and character B. You'll have these examples for chapters 2 through 8. Now, a great example he uses is Superman and Batman. And a side note, Stan Lee does give a lot of credit to other comic book industry characters in this book, which I just think is pretty cool. So for these chapters on creating characters, you want to read through the specifics and make notes on the details of what they're looking for within our character. Again, this is more of how to create superheroes rather than how to draw, because you can see here that this 5-step process is a bit intimidating. So for an example for you to use throughout this book, I'll show you a quick slideshow using the How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way process, starting with Captain Titan here. So step 1, start with your basic stick figure. Step 2, you add in those 3-dimensional shapes. Step 3, we'll start from the top and we begin sculpting the anatomy. Step 4, we'll add in the placement of the suit or the costume elements. Now, notice how I kept everything fairly light. I didn't really press super hard on the paper, because in step 5, we'll want to erase those basic instruction lines and define the anatomy and the suit a little bit more. Now, step 6, we'll transition over to a harder lead and be a bit more decisive with what lines we're going to ink. Now, to finalize your drawing, follow along the example and shade your character as you see fit. Just try to identify the light source first. Now, everyone's process is a little different, and you want to keep in mind that yours will not look exactly like the example. And remember, that is okay. You have not been drawing for the better half of your life yet. We move on to page 48, which is a great practice to keep your character from having RBF. Now you can see why it's highly recommended to practice these 3 moves as shown here. You have happy, sad, and angry. Now let's be real, we all experience these emotions, and so should your character. You can use these references or try and take some selfies and use yourself as an example. Now you're basically going to repeat the full character and the facial feature process for the next archetype and with every character of this book. Now that we know what to practice, we're going to quickly review what makes each chapter truly unique. Chapter 3 focuses on heroines. Now boys, listen up and read this chapter closely. Don't just ogle it and move on. Because as stated here, the female of the species is more deadly than the male. Pages 56 and 57 get us ready to begin creating and drawing our lady characters. Only this time we have the W type and the E type, which are used for examples of Wonder Woman and Elektra, which I think you already know what makes these two characters vastly different. The pencil to paper section is a great read as it reminds you to draw using basic shapes and to draw your shapes through your figure. Then, on page 58, as it states, when you've fully fleshed out your figure, you'll want to erase all your draw through construction lines. Now, this is an important reminder to learn how to erase. We finish out the chapter acknowledging body types, and we want to keep in mind what makes our superheroine so unique. It's not just about beauty and the brute strength, but it's more about her heart and her strength as a character. Keep that in mind, boys. Again, you'll want to practice the facial expressions and moods, but keep in mind to use less lines to keep these characters more feminine. Chapter 4 will review sidekicks, but with more focus on how does their story and their powers relate to the main character. You want to think Bucky to Captain America, Robin to Batman. Pretty self-explanatory. Page 78 has a great segment and a reminder of going back to the basics. Remember, all our drawings begin with simple shapes and gesture drawings, so remember to practice this. Chapter 5, if you didn't read The Origins of a Superhero, I highly recommend reading The Truth About Villains. It's a great reminder of the thought process that you'll need to understand what makes this villain who they are. This chapter shows us how to pair our villain against the appropriate superhero. The step-by-step process for Mario Man's is a little different, jumping from the basic shapes immediately into his facial features and the suit. You'll want to practice what we did with the simple stick figure and the basic shapes to make sure that you understand how the clothing drapes on the anatomy. He's fairly simple to draw, however, the next character, Cheeks, will be a little bit more complex. Now, in this example, drawing hands is often difficult, but if you follow along on this process, you can see a great example of how they are simplified. Chapter 6, Brutes and Vixens. This chapter is all about big monster characters and the bad girls. Page 103 has a great exercise defining brute. Now, I think this is a really fun practice where we want to write out the characteristics of a brute and try drawing what comes to mind. If a pose isn't coming to mind, try using the draw along of the devourer here. Pages 106 to 108 breaks down a brute's expression and how they should be very exaggerated along with the difference between an alien brute and a human one. Now for our vixens, be sure to read the notes throughout the process. I really do like the note here. With a vixen, attitude is every bit as important as her looks. Now remember to focus on their pose and their overall attitude. Quite often, a little sinister look goes a long way rather than drawing them half naked. But remember, although they're all tough with attitude, they feel emotions just the same. Chapter 7 focuses on supporting characters, and I do highly recommend reading pages 118 to 123 as it explains how these characters of the mom, the dad, the girlfriend, the teacher, the best friend play a significant role in our superhero story. There's several step-by-step characters, and although these characters might not be as fun to draw, you want to practice them because it's going to help you develop your skill at drawing different body types and proportions. Now here's a great exercise, assembling your cast and drawing them all together. Definitely practice this and pay attention here to learn about line weight and how to make sure that your main character remains front and center. Chapter 8, moving on to monsters. Pages 138 to 143 have a great history lesson that makes for even better storytelling. And after all, isn't that what we're trying to accomplish? So read it. Before we begin our drawing practice, also make note of the statement here. When creating alien monsters, you're only limited by your imagination. The more bizarre an alien monster looks, the better. Now this is important to keep in mind because you'll be drawing these alien characters over and over. Now one alien that comes to mind is, well, the alien, a xenomorph. So think about all the detail an artist needs to put into these drawings because you'll be drawing all these details repeatedly. So get creative, but don't overdo it. The glow is a really fun character to practice as it helps with drawing elements that complement your character, such as, the puff of smoke here and the bats. On page 153, Stan challenges us to create a monster. So read the questions he provides here and the essential elements mentioned here, and you can draw your very own monster character. Now, I think this is a very fun test for what you've learned so far. You're aligning the questions and the details you need to create your character. Chapter 9 expands on our characters, and you'll want to read pages 156 to 169 and practice all three of these characters. Stan Lee breaks down the law of robotics and the difference between robots, androids, cyborgs, and what elements to consider when developing them. Again, similar to aliens, be aware of how much detail you put into your design. Chapter 10, Animals, Creatures, and Pets. Now, if you have a furry best friend, then jump right into drawing them as a superhero. But if not, definitely read about the importance they have in our lives. I mean, come on, you didn't tear up during Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? You haven't been rooting for John Wick this whole time? Now, as I have learned from many artists out there, take note on page 176. You want to find a reference image first and sketch over that image to understand how the anatomy is laid out for each animal. Now, remember, using a reference is not cheating. There's a quick overview of werewolves and other types of creatures. Now, basically, take everything that you just learned about a superhero or a villain, mix that with some notes about an animal, throw it into a Yahtzee shaker, and let it rip. You can combine all these elements, but try to keep the anatomy like the animal it has mutated or evolved from. Chapter 11 teaches us that the vehicle should match the driver's lifestyle. It breaks down the Ghost Riders, talks about the Fantastic Four, the Punisher, and Batman. But it has some Tesla-looking car as an example. So practice that, or you can find another car to practice from using the step-by-step process. Spaceships are mentioned very briefly in this chapter, but I would almost practice them after the next chapter because oftentimes we're focused on what's going on inside the spaceship. Chapter 12 breaks down the different types of headquarters and why it's important in storytelling to make it make sense. Now, I highly recommend reading pages 198 to 200 as they will help you understand the amount of time and effort that you may have to put into someone's secret lair. Page 204 has a great list of what to consider when building a hideout. You want to think of, the Predator on their ship, Iron Man landing at Avengers Mansion, Batman entering the Batcave. Think of their surroundings and the elements that are included. Page 205 has a special assignment, and I couldn't agree more. Go and get out, especially after sitting through this video. And bravo if you've made it this far. So, after this, take a sketchbook or a notepad, get outside, and go sketch or take note of what you see. Get a sense of real-world perspective and some new inspiration for your characters. Okay, we're almost done. Chapter 13. Pages 208 to 212 provides the history of team-ups and why people love the idea of a team. Page 210 has another challenge and provides a list of the team that Stan Lee wants you to assemble. You'll want to practice this to get the idea of the team. Now after that, we want to see our team in action. So you can turn over to page 212 and try to draw your team in action like the master Umberto Ramos did here. Now the box of more things to consider is super helpful, and again, some of the details you should keep in mind. Now for the last exercise, superheroes versus supervillains. This is a short read, but it's a great exercise. You want to sketch this battle scene and see what you've learned from this book. Take note on what you like and what you don't like. Make note on what you understand and what you might need to go back and revisit. If it's a particular subject, there's a great suggestion page for reading and websites on page 222. So here's the verdict. Stan Lee's How to Draw Superheroes is a fun, educational, inspiring guide that's perfect for enhancing your character in comic book art. It's not the most detailed how to draw book, but it is one of the best confidence builders for new artists. You want to try out these exercises, create some new characters, post them and tag me at The Artistic Avenger. Now, if you enjoyed this review, smash that like button, and if you've read this book or want me to review another art book, drop a comment below. And hey, if you're new here, please subscribe, and don't forget to share with fellow artists. Until next time, stay radical.